So what is an exception? Right now in my routes API file, I define a route, I'm expecting an ID, and I throw it to this method. If you open this up, I'm catching the ID and I'm looking it up in the articles table. For those of you saying I could have used route model binding, I know I'm doing this for a reason. So we catch the article, we make some changes, and we save it. Now this is called a happy path. But what about when somebody gives me an ID and that's not in my articles table? Then what happens? I get back a null. On the null, I'm trying to access a property. I make some changes to it, which is obviously going to give me a fatal error. Let's take a look at it. I hit enter. I get back a 500 internal server error. If you look at the messages, they're not that descriptive. It should just be a one-line statement letting me know if I did something wrong or if there's something wrong on the server. So now let's go back and let's see what's really going on in the code. I'm saying that everything will be working normally except when you give me an ID which doesn't exist in my articles table. So this except part is really the key. So this except is really the exception. So if I come here and I say now here I can just point that out. I can say return new, and this exception can be found here. I can type out any message I want. I can say access an article which does not exist. And then I can give a status code, let's say 404, which means not found. Now when I go back and try to hit the API, I'll get back the message I sent back to the user. But I want you to notice something. Look at all this other garbage stuff, which really is just garbage to the person consuming my API. They don't really care about this. They just want a one-line statement. That's all they want to see. Then you look at the status code. I set it to 404. Right now I'm seeing 500. So what really went bad? Let's go back and let's see what we did. We said that, look, normally things will go just fine, except, this is where the exception comes in, except when you give me an ID which doesn't exist in my articles table. Then I'm going to let you know that this is what you did wrong. That's the exception. But just like in sports, if someone's throwing something, somebody else has to catch it. So now we're going to come up here on the first line. Now since I'm using VS Code, I can just type try and I'll get this hint. If I click on it, I'll get this try catch. So if I'm throwing something, someone has to catch it. Now I'm going to take all my code, cut it, and this is where I put my code. I'm going to go form it a little bit better. And now notice that I'm throwing an exception here. I can catch it in this location. I can come here and I can say return response JSON, and then I can say message, and this object right here, th, is going to have this message plus the status code. So let's try it out. Let's say get message, and then let me just go back here. After this array, I can just say th get code. So whatever code I typed in here is not going to be accessible here. Whatever message I have typed here is now going to be accessible via this method. I'm going to hit save, go back. Hopefully this time I'm going to get a much better response. Now look, I get a 404 and I get a one simple line statement letting me know here this is what I did wrong while trying to consume this API. This is what an exception is. We'll go back to the code one more time to make it really simple. Exception is saying that my code will work fine normally, except when you give me this information which will cause my code to break. And with exceptions, you throw an exception, you catch one, and you let them know gracefully this is what you need to do differently in order to get a better response from my API. So come along with me. I'm going to go into much more detail. You can look at the timeline, which will point out exactly what I'm going through, and maybe you can jump to that section. Hit that subscribe button. Now we're going to look at custom exceptions. So earlier we looked at how we get an ID, look it up in the articles table, and if we can't find it, we throw an exception. Because if we don't, we'll get fatal errors. This is a much more classier way of letting the person who's using our API know something's wrong. So if I scroll up, I'll notice the same problem. I'll get an ID, I'll try to look it up in the articles table, and immediately I try to throw it back to the person calling my API. But if I get a null object, at that point I can't access a property on it. To solve this problem, I'm going to scroll down and reuse the same logic. I go back and I'm going to paste it in here. Now this is going to work, but immediately you should see a problem. And the problem is I'm reusing the same logic by copying and pasting. I should centralize this code. There's a concept called don't repeat yourself, dry. To solve this problem, we're going to use custom exceptions. I am going to use my terminal and write down PHP artisan, make exception, and then I'll give it a name like could not find article, and let's call it exception there. Before hitting enter, I'm going to go back and type the word help. Okay? And what you'll notice is there's a render and a report. These two flags will create methods for me. I'm going to explain later on what these methods do for us, but for now, let's go, remove the help word, and then at the end, we'll write down render and report. I'm going to hit enter, and this class is created for me in the app exceptions folder. So let's go back, and sure enough, in my app exceptions, there's a class called could not find article. There's a report and render method, which we're going to go over later. For now, I'm going to go here and write down protected message. And the message is what we had in the articles table. So I'm going to copy this out and paste it here. And then again, I'm going to say protected code. The status code I want it to have is 404. I'm going to hit save. For those of you wondering, how does this class pick up on this? It's extending from something called exception. This is the same exception we were using earlier. So if you do a bit of deep dive, I'm going to hold down my control and click on exception. If this isn't opening up for you, you need to install some extensions. They're called PHP IntelliFence by Ben Mewburn. And while you're at it, you might as well look for something called PHP Namespace Resolver. It's by Mehdi Hassan. You can find it by clicking here and typing it out. Both of these are really helpful when you're developing in PHP. So if you go back to the exception class, you'll notice that it has a message property and a code property. This is what we're overriding. So next time anybody uses this class, this is the message that they'll see. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back. I'll paste this in. And since I have the extension PHP Name Resolver by Mehdi Hassan, I'm going to right click on this and it will give me the option of importing the class. You could use a keyboard shortcut or just click, and at the bottom you'll see it say the class is imported. If I double click on this and scroll up, you'll see that the class was actually imported for me. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to copy this part right here. Paste it in, give it a bit of space, and now I'm done. Notice that I didn't have to type the message out again and again. That message is now included, baked into the class. So is the status code. So now I can just copy this out, scroll down again, I'll comment this part out, paste it here. Now the benefit of this approach is if tomorrow I need to change the message, I don't need to hunt down every method that is using this. I could just go to this class, I'm going to control click into it, and then I can just change it in one place. And any place that's using this exception is going to be updated. If I need to change the status code, I only need to change it in one place. That's the benefit of custom exceptions. Now we're going to look at the render method. What is this really for? So the render method, if you read it here, it says render the exception as an HTTP response. I'm going to remove this portion right here. And since I'm returning API responses, I'm going to say return response JSON, and then I'm going to create an array. In this section, I'm going to say message, and then I can say this message. Now the benefit of the render method is I can give more information if I wanted to. Now if I did not do anything here, you notice I still get the same exact error, and the reason is this part right here. The catch block catches the error message, the exception class, goes in and finds the message. In our case, the message was this right here. it easily took this message, printed it out, and then it said, well, let me get the code of this exception class, and the exception class code was 404. So in this case, this part was doing just fine. But if you need to send back a bit more information for whatever reason, you can come here and you can say error code counter, and let's just put in any random number. Okay, now I'm going to come here after the array and say this code. So this code is really what's typed up here. Message is going to pick up from the message that we have here. If I hit save and I go to Postman and I hit enter, you'll notice I don't see that extra message that we just created. So I'm going to go back. Let's see what happened. In this particular case, what's happening is this exception is thrown, which causes, as soon as you throw something, it has to be caught. So it catches it here, and throwable is the superclass. This is where everything is extending from. The exception class we just looked at here is really extending from throwable. It catches that object and it says, let me get the message. And that, in this case, the message was right here. Then it says, let me get the code. And in this case, the code was 404. And that's the information it sends back. However, we want to send back the custom response that we have. So in order to get this, I'm going to copy out the name of the class, come down here, and I'm going to copy this one more time and paste. The first thing I'm going to do is come back, copy the name of the class, and I'm going to paste it right here. And I'm going to say, as soon as you catch this exception. So whenever someone throws this exception, I'm going to catch that exception. And once I catch it, I'll get it in this object. So what I'm getting is the object which was created here. And at this point, I'm going to remove this part of the code and say return th, and then I'll call the render method. Now the render method is expecting a request object. So I'll include that in there. And then I'm going to hit save. Now when I go back and I hit send, I get back the response that I'm expecting. This is how the render method is helping us. Next, we're going to look at report. If you've already given the information you needed to the user, what mistake they're making, what does report do? Now the report method, it reports things to people that need to know about this. I want you to consider a scenario. You are on an e-commerce website and an exception is thrown your way, but you were trying to make an order. For whatever reason, the order couldn't be placed. You don't want to lose that customer. So what you do is you first let them know, here's the problem we're facing. Next, in the report method, you can email your customer support representative information like, well, this is the username, email of the customer that's trying to place order XYZ. These are the products they want, and this is the date they try to place the order on. So the report method is really to alert people within your company that this problem occurred and so people were affected by it. Maybe you want somebody to take action. This customer support representative could call this person up and help them place that order so you don't lose that sale. It could be a big sale. It doesn't necessarily have to be a $10 sale. It could be in the hundreds. So that's the point of this report method. Right now, we're not going to send out an email. What we're going to do is I created a notes table, and I'm going to go here and say create. And in order to send out, let me just import the class. I'm going to right click and say import. And app models note is what I want. And I created a migration for this earlier, so let me jump to it. I'm expecting an IP address. Let me include that here. And it is request. And then I'm going to say IP address. I'm going to copy that out. By the way, what I just did was Control, Alt, and the downward arrow key. And it just duplicates that line for me. I'm going to go back and copy this in. Paste it here. And then this one here as well. And now let's put it on this side. So this one is going to be this article ID. And comments is going to be the error message that we have up here. Now you might notice a squiggly line, and it's telling me this isn't defined. So what I want to do is include the article ID in here. So how do I do that? I create a constructor, and then I say construct And now what I could do, here's one option. I could come up here and say protected article ID, and then come here and say give me an article ID which I'll assign to this way. So I could do this, but since I'm using PHP 8 and above, I could do this in one line. I can copy this here and I could place it right here. I no longer need this line, and I can do this, and also I can remove it from here. So now one line does all of that. So what's going to happen is whenever someone calls this exception or creates an object of it, they have to pass me an article ID. And then I pass that information into the node that I create. So now I go here, and if I come back to my code, you'll notice there's another squiggly red line. It's telling me it's expecting information, which is the ID. Here's the article ID. So I'll just put that in here, and I'll scroll up to this method, and I'll do the same thing. I'll hit save. Now I'm going to come back. I'm going to hit this error again. It's done that. So now let's go to my database. I'm going to go to PHP, my admin. Again, if you're wondering what this tool is, I've included a link in the description, and there's a video which will walk you through how to use this tool. It's really helpful. I'm going to come here, root. I'm going to hit login. And here's my sandbox database. And there is the notes table. Now, here's the information. So it's been saved. So this is how you use the custom exceptions. Now we're going to look at something called global exception handling. So what does that mean? Right now, you'll notice that in this particular case, we're throwing an exception and then we're catching it right here. But if you scroll up, we're also throwing this exception, but we're not catching this particular exception. And the reason we were catching it is, if you go right to this file, we wanted this particular response. I'm going to close this, come back. So what we'll have to do is copy this code from here and then paste that code here. Earlier I told you whenever you're copying and pasting code, it's a good sign that you're violating the principle of dry, which is don't repeat yourself. So how do we solve this problem? I'm going to go ahead and let's Google up Laravel Exception, and I'll click on this. So in Laravel 11, when you scroll down, you need to hit on handling exceptions, and you'll notice it tells you to go to bootstrap app.php file. So we're going to go there. So we're going to open this up. We're going to go to bootstrap, and then there's app.php. And there you see with exceptions. I'm going to go back to the documentation, and it says within the with exceptions, copy this code. So I'm going to copy that, paste it in here, and then this is where our exception goes. So I'm going to go back to the articles controller. I'm going to copy this, paste it right here, right click, import the class. So it says right here the class is imported, and if I scroll up, I'll notice that it has been imported. Now, next, I'm going to paste something else in here. I'm going to go back to article controller, and I'm just going to copy this one line. I'm going to paste it in here. I need to change this to E. I'm going to need to change this to E because over here, that's what I've set it to E as well. I'm going to save, go back, and now I can remove this line of code. I'm going to hit save. This is for show. I'll do the same thing for this method. I'll remove this, and I'll save. Now, you'll notice that I'm still repeating code. I'm saying throwable th. Throwable means any error that shows up that has not been caught, it will catch it. And I'm doing the same thing with this particular method. So again, I'm going to copy this out. I'm going to say copy. I'll go back to bootstrap app.php. And again, I'm going to go to my Laravel's file, copy this code, come back. And then over here, I'll copy in throwable. So I'm going to say backslash throwable, and then over here, I'll copy in this part of the code. And now everything should work fine. The only difference is before you'll notice that I was catching the object in th variable. I'm just gonna, over here it's e, so I'm just gonna change this to e as well. So, oops. Now let's go back and test this out. Now since we're catching everything here, we can remove the try catch blocks from here. Now we'll just take our code and remove the try catch blocks, paste it here. Let me just fix the formatting. I'll do the save. Same thing with this one. I'm just gonna take this and let me fix the formatting. Now let's try our code out. And now when I hit the send button, you'll notice I get an error. It turns out I made a small mistake. I'm gonna go back, fix it right now. And it was in my migrations file. I'm gonna hit Control P, write down create notes. And over here, I'm saying that whatever ID I save needs to be in the articles table, which clearly is not gonna exist. So if an ID doesn't exist in the articles table, I can't save that error. So I'm gonna change this, unsigned, big integer. And then I'm just gonna go and remove all this other stuff. Now I need to run the migration again. I'm gonna switch to my console, write down PHP artisan, migrate, fresh, and let's just seed the whole thing. And now I see the error message that I wanted to see. That's all there is for exceptions for now. If you want to know more about this topic, please let me know in the comments.